Hello, my name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book review. Today, I'm going to be covering this book, A Primate's Memoir. The subtitle is A Neuroscientist's Unconventional Life Among the Baboons. This book is about a naturalist, a neuroscientist who spends time researching and studying a specific troop of baboons in a national park in Africa, and then really keeps track of them throughout the years, the different dynamics he sees, while also doing that memoir style thing where he discusses his own anecdotes and adventures while living in Africa doing these studies. I bought this book. Well, first I bought it at Reston Used Books in Reston, Virginia. I've talked about that bookstore before. It's a really homey, down-to-earth bookstore, very comfortable. And I went to work at a summer camp in 2019, and I brought a bin full of books that I was going to read throughout that summer, because the previous year I had a few books, about 6 or 7, and I just ended up rereading them on the front porch while waiting for the sun to rise and for breakfast to start. And as I came back in 2019, I had more books because I knew how quickly I would read through the ones I had. So I read through this, my first copy, and I lent it out to a coworker who didn't finish it by the end of the summer, and I think forgot to give it back to me. I ended up not having that copy by the start of my drive home. So I went down to Coes, looked, and sure enough, A Primate's Memoir was on the shelves. So, right off the bat, I'd say I paid for it used twice, so probably around $12 or $13 total. I would buy this book new if I lost this copy and ended up having to buy another one. It's that good a book. So there's that segment I know I get to every video. Yes, I bought it used. I would look for it used again, but I've paid for it enough times that if I had to pay for this book again, I'd buy it new. Just like so many other books, I was rereading this one for research on this video, and I realized that there's actually some notes and like a sticky note in here. And what's funny is that the notes are written in a different handwriting than the sticky note. So I'll show off the sticky note right now, if the light catches it well. And it just says, "What think of troop?" But then, for example, on page 57 at the start of chapter 5, there's all this writing, and it doesn't look anything at all like the flowing handwriting at the start of the book. Whoever read this book before me, if they were taking such extensive notes throughout the book, they probably did not finish it, because the book only has notes up through about page 65. But I'll get to the actual meat of the story now. So, A Primate's Memoir, like I said earlier, is about a man who, a neuroscientist, who goes to study a troop of baboons in Africa. His acknowledgments actually describe it a bit better. "This is a memoir of my more than 20 years spent working intermittently in a national park in East Africa. The stories are true, but as is often the case in such retellings, subject to a bit of literary license that I want to describe here." So, first and foremost, he changes a lot of the names, and a number of humans and a number of baboons represent composites of a few members of their species. This was done to keep down the cast of characters coming and going. For example, within the human realm, a particular game park ranger, British tour operator, or tourist lodge waiter may be a composite of a few individuals. All of the major baboon figures are real individuals, as are the major human characters. A lot of his names for the baboons he's studying end up being older Hebrew names. So in the early chapters, Solomon is the alpha male and Leah is the alpha female. Those two names being from the Bible. Names such as Devorah, he gives them ones such as Nebuchadnezzar, Ruth, some older biblical names. Obadiah as well, that's a funny one. A good example of a bunch of those names is this underlined sentence here on page 21. Even younger than Joshua and Benjamin were David and Daniel. They had just joined the troop, still frazzled by the trauma of their first transfer, the months of being outsiders in a new troop, away from friends and family amid hassling strangers on the edge of the troop and exposed to predators. There was one adult male who I felt certain had grown up in the troop, had never transferred out. Of the hundreds of baboons I would eventually know, Job had to have been dealt the worst set of cards. Job was rail thin and had far too large a head for his body. He had tremors and spasms and palsies and seizures. His hair fell out intermittently, and each rainy season his orifices would bloom with fungi. He had long, fragile limbs and mange on his tail. As far as I could tell, he'd never hit puberty. Undescended testes, no secondary sexual characteristics like large canines or cape hair or a deep voice or muscles. He was no idiot, though, and went about life with the alert, canny vigilance of someone honed by constant fear. I had all sorts of theories as to what was wrong with him, gleaned from endocrinology textbooks that swam with disturbing pictures of glandular disasters, people standing naked in front of height charts, their eyes blacked out with a rectangle. Klinefelter syndrome was my leading guess for Job, but I never found out. He was undiagnosed, beyond being certifiably weird and sad. While the troop consisted of 63 members in 1979, these were the ones around whom the central events swirled. And these that he mentions is that there's a list of like 12 to 16 that he's really named and is discussing in his chapters. So it is interesting. He does do other things. He does go to Kenya at one point in time. He goes traveling in different lorries. He really tries to get a bit of an experience of Africa while out there, not just to be purely a tourist or a scientist, but also to expand his knowledge and his worldview. He also kind of meets and gets to know some Maasai people. There's a good section in chapter 10 titled The First Maasai that kind of explains his interactions with them. He brings them up throughout the story, but this kind of starts it. They ask me why, of all the animals here, I come to study baboons. I explain how much they are like people, how their diseases are similar. No, they are not so much like people, they retort. I try the paleontology number on them. You know, up in the desert up north, there are scientists there finding amazing things. The scientists from the museum. How does he know that? Yes, they have found bones of men, but they are not really from men. People want to know what I mean by this. Well, they are like half men, but they are also like half baboons. The head bone, I don't know the Swahili word for skull, is not as big as a person's, but it is bigger than a baboon's. And the face is not so long like a baboon's, but longer than a person's. And they can tell from the bone here, pointing to the pelvis, that these people did not walk up like this, but not like a baboon either. These are baboon men, one of the elders says. Exactly, I confirm emphatically. But where are these people, someone asks. That's the thing, these bones are very old. So old from before the Europeans, from before there were tribes, from before people were speaking languages. The scientists think these baboon men are the great-great-great-grandfathers of people and of baboons. Well, in this case it would be chimpanzees, but he's simplifying. Everyone sits and digests this for a while. The old men pick at the goat gristle in their teeth. Someone chews away the dog. Someone else spits. Ah, go on, you're full of it, one of the old men in effect says. No, really. Did they have spears? Soirowa asks. No, but they had little rocks that they would use to dig at things and hit things. Did they have tails? No. Did they wear clothes? No one knows. Clothes wouldn't last that long, but the scientists think they did not wear clothes. Did they wear shoes or watches? Asks a young guy. The old men snicker, and he realizes he asked a ridiculous question and gets embarrassed. Shoes and watches are hot stuff in the region this year. Shoes are worn on the hip, tied around the waist to keep odds and ends in. Watches are worn without regard for time. Everyone mulls some more. Finally, Soirowa asks what is probably the question they were all wondering. Were they Maasai? I tell him maybe, but no one knows. Finally, Soirowa, after some brooding, says, You know, these days I can tell time, and I can speak Swahili, and I know about money, and my grandfather could not do any of those things. People are always learning new things. Maybe, once, a long, long time ago, these were the first Maasai, and they didn't even know how to be people yet. Everyone seemed satisfied with that answer, and soon people are quizzing Soirowa and me about two-story houses in Nairobi and America. When the cows in the upper village pee, will it go on the heads of the people below? And he goes on, and there's a lot of stories of interactions with communities that seem to like him and that he can communicate with and that he seems to like. So, this book doesn't really say much about people, nor does it really say much about any. It's a memoir, but it's relaying these fantastic events and the stories of these baboons and the stories of these people and how they all mix together in this national park. It's not overtly insightful. If there is some meaning to be gleaned from this book, after having read it 3 or 4 times, I didn't really get it, but it was still fun to read, and the stories he told are larger than life and funny and charming, and I want to read more of his work. I think it was a good book. I definitely would buy it again if I lost this copy, but I think more than anything else, it's just a simple it's a simple story. It's a simple retelling of events. And if you're looking for that deeper meaning, you're not necessarily going to find it here. My name is Wildstag, and thank you again for tuning in to another used book review.